So research is not broken. It's working exactly as intended. So you would have had to have been living under a rock for the last 5 years, not to have been exposed in some way to the shadier side of our corporate world. And whatever your own personal opinion, you can't argue that the pharmaceutical industry are not top of that list. Now, to most people with MDs and PhDs are somehow automatically held up as the gold standard for all humankind, incorruptible and born with this innate ability to disseminate information that us mere mortals could never possibly understand. Now, I was once one of these people. If I needed anything, I always went to an expert, but as I've got older and more of these experts have failed to deliver, I've begun to realise that they are just human. You get good ones, you get bad ones, but none of them have any innate ability that I don't have or that you don't have. Now, it's what I call elitism. And in the last 12 months, I've begun to see it everywhere. So in education, the entire planet agrees with the meme that states, "Thank God I learned advanced Pythagorean theory. What would my life look like now if I didn't have this immensely useful knowledge?" Okay, I'm paraphrasing, I added a little bit there. But when you begin to openly question the system or suggest homeschooling to most people, they just look at you as if you're completely nuts. It's kind of an example of Stockholm syndrome. We think this system's broken, but if you question it, you're nuts. And it's the same with politics. They're all incompetent, corrupt, evil. Yet as soon as a new election cycle begins, people begin to turn their backs on family members, lifelong friends, in favour of said incompetent, corrupt, evil politician. But I believe the area which has gaslit us the most and the most effectively crosses over the two worst culprits, education and healthcare. Now, I listened to a podcast last year. Eric Weinstein and Terence Howard appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience to discuss some of Terence's claims. And during the episode, Eric Weinstein said something which almost felt like he was shouting it at me. Now, I want to point out, this is not so much about Terence's ideas, one way or the other, because some of them are quite out there, and I haven't got the knowledge or the ability to stress test them. But it's about the way in which institutions look upon the layperson and why I think it's so clearly wrong. So Terence Howard had begun to explain his controversial theories, and while some of it was very much out there, and in Weinstein's opinion was way off the mark, there were a few areas that Weinstein conceded did seem to be very valid, even if he did claim that they had been sort of discovered by mistake or by accident. Now, at this point, Terence Howard simply asked, how do I get people to listen, take this seriously, and take it to the next level? And this is what I believe is very telling. Weinstein, who I actually really like, I really respect, but he explains that the way to be taken seriously would be to get his theories peer reviewed. But there was a small catch. Weinstein explained that without the PhD, Howard would never be on his level, and in turn would never be seen or accepted as his peer, and as such, he would never get the peer review that he so sorely needed. Now, I obviously understand that we have to have standards in every area of our life, and when it comes to research, most certainly, but I believe these standards should never be in place to stifle genuine discovery, especially something which could change so much. This elitism is one of the most outrageous and detrimental parts of the human psyche. And for many of us, this has been the last 5 years of our life. I would estimate that I've heard the phrase, "but you're not a doctor," 23,000 times since 2020. Now, that's a statement which is certainly true, but on each and every occasion, it was to point out that not being a doctor now meant that I could not read or disseminate words. It's the perfect example of the confusion that pejoratives such as conspiracy theorist are supposed to lead to. Another tactic which was used throughout the entire interview, which had my blood boiling, is Weinstein, again, who I actually like, would ask Howard to explain his theory. Yet, when he did, he would keep interrupting him, saying, "Stop teaching me. You can't teach me. I know more than you." Again, while I understand the accusation, all that Howard was doing was explaining his theory and responding to questions that were posed to him. Now, if his responses were incorrect or flawed, then by all means, this is the point where Eric Weinstein would push back. But just to perpetually claim he was trying to teach was clearly just a very well-established tactic for this type of conversation. And it made it impossible to ever move forwards. It just came across as arrogant and egotistical. And actually, while I do like him, my opinion of Eric did drop ever so slightly. But why do I claim that research is set up so perfectly? Well, research is no longer set up with progress in mind. Sure, it's part of the equation, and I'm sure the actual individual scientists carrying out the research that's been assigned to them have that in their mind. And I think in decades gone, there was still some sort of balance there, which did allow good ideas to gain traction. But today, I don't think that's the case. Every single research study out there is driven by one factor: how profitable and controllable it is. How much money will it make the shareholders? So research is funded by the taxpayer, managed by private pharmaceutical companies, which makes sense. But when a study bears fruit, who do you think benefits from the profits? Now, obviously, that's a rhetorical question. It doesn't go back into the funders, who are the taxpayers. It goes into the shareholder pocket. So we know that humans are greedy, but at least they're making discoveries that will benefit us. If not, surely the regulators will get them. Well, there's another problem. The pharmaceutical industry are by far the biggest funders of their own regulators, oftentimes with board members flip-flopping between the two entities. But don't worry, there's always the peer review. Well, on top of the problems that we've already established surrounding the peer review process, those egos and elitism, that really is just the tip of the iceberg. The pharmaceutical industry, again, they're also indirectly one of the biggest funders of the medical journals. And they do this through a backdoor sort of avenue. It's not through funding, it's not through investment or lobbying. Instead, they buy and distribute all of the printed peer-reviewed studies from the journals. And that's how they indirectly fund the people that are there to obviously double check and make sure that their products are safe and effective. Well, that's awful. But if anything untoward really were going on, the media would be all over it. Welcome to CNN. Brought to you by Pfizer. Lots of underhand tactics, but these are just examples of the obvious. But all of these institutions are part of the scam. And as such, they all fund, donate, and cover for one another. It's the reason that the sugar industry were able to bribe Harvard scientists to pin heart disease on red meat. Okay, they were also criminally fined for said bribes, yet 40 odd years later, doctors across the West are still parroting the same disproven, flawed, corrupted study. It's the reason that Purdue Pharma were able to murder millions of people with OxyContin. It's the reason why the average adult takes 3+ medications every day and is never given any simple dietary or lifestyle advice and is still getting sicker and sicker. It's the reason why people like me are continuing to be mocked for trying to raise awareness that life can be better for us all. And it's actually very easy to do. But you do need to drop the ego, and you do need to admit that you have been wrong. Unfortunately, another thing that the last 5 years has kind of taught me is at least 60% of the population would rather continue to ignore everything which is right in front of their face, rather than just own up and admit they got it wrong, and in turn, begin to make changes that will improve their lives. It's absolutely crazy. So if you're still with me, I may not be an authority. I don't have the PhD, the Chufty badge. But this is me telling you that your opinion does count. and you are far more capable than you've ever been programmed to think. It's okay to be wrong, especially if admitting that means that you can positively change your life. And all of us will welcome people back to the real world without any judgment, without any "I told you so's." Or you can just keep your head buried. You can mock those that care about improving their own lives, but be prepared for deathbed regrets that could come sooner than they have to. I turned my back on Western healthcare well over a decade ago. They were the first experts to consistently fail me, and it took personal responsibility and research to finally get myself back to my peak. But, like I say, you have a choice to make. Try and make the right one. I hope you enjoyed that. See you soon, guys. Like, share, comment, hit the subscribe button. Until next time, thanks, guys. The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience. The Alternative Experience.